Hello, everybody. This is Kevin Jones with the FITA Museum in Los Angeles, and I'm welcoming you to another episode of Collection Conversations with the FITA Museum. And I will be going live today with Christina Johnson. I'm just trying to get a hold of her. Okay. And, oh, I see we have a lot of people with us today. That's really exciting. Tapping on Christina. Sorry about this. All right. We are going to be talking today about how to care for our collections. And there we go. Early. And because we have a lot of questions about how we actually take care of our collections. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you too. So we actually have a lot of viewers already this morning, which is really exciting.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah,
I'm glad to see all of your usernames scrolling on my face.
that's right. So, and it's been a busy morning for me already because I have plasterers here that are working on the ceiling at my house. So they're all actually joining as well to learn. Really?
Put the dog
about
in the patio, so hopefully they're not going to want to interject to our conversation. So we'll just have to see what happens.
They could have some good barks though.
Yeah.
So okay. It was the last time, Christina, you and I spoke that I got cut off, and I have to admit it was my fault because I forgot to set up my clock. So I was kind of gauging this, and I was hoping you were going to help me, and you did.
Do you have your clock? Do you have your clock right
I have it. It's
okay.
right here, so I can see it.
I have a clock too, just in case.
Good, perfect. So I thought, I mean, it was such a cliffhanger. You know, the question was, what's your favorite piece?
Yeah.
And I was just in the middle of describing it, and so I thought I would just kind of start there today.
Okay.
And so again, my favorite piece, it's actually coming up in our project, which is called Sporting Fashion, Outdoor Girls, 1800 to 1960, looking at the whole development of how sportswear developed for women over that 160-year time period. And one of my favorite pieces is something I always wanted, I always hoped to find, but I'd actually never seen an example before. And there was a really great supporter of the museum, Stephen Porterfield, who's out of Midland, Texas. His store is called The Cat's Meow, and he's been a really great supporter of the museum, both through donations, but also with pieces that we've acquired from him, that he looks all over the world for us. And he found this. He told me he found something and he was going to mail it to us, and thought, okay, so it arrived. You had just left work for the day because it came late in the afternoon. So I'm opening up this box and I look inside. I was like, wow, what is this? Because it's really, really a lot of pattern. And so I pulled the jacket out, and literally the sleeves were like, my camera's not even big enough.
Right.
I mean, it's massive. And I put the jacket on a form. I'm like, wow, that is really an over-the-top jacket. And then I looked inside the box again. I'm like, oh, there's more. And I pulled out a gator. And instantly I knew that this was a mid-1890s cycling ensemble, which is something I love. And we did not really have in our collection. And there was yet more, and I thought, oh, please, I mean, let it be a bloomer ensemble.
Right,
I mean,
right.
a skirt, a matching skirt, a whole matched outfit, cycling outfit is extremely rare.
We'll take the skirt, but we want the bloomer.
Well, we want the bloomers. Yeah. And then I pulled it up, and it was the bloomers. And I literally screamed. I immediately called you, and I'm like, you got to come back, you got to come back.
I know. And you're describing.
But you were already about home.
I know.
So I wanted to show everybody what this outfit is. Now, this is just a little cheesy printout from our catalog when we were doing proofs and stuff. So I hope that everybody can see. This is the actual ensemble. This is the cycling ensemble. So you can see Here's the jacket. These are the gaiters that I pulled out, and then the bloomers, these divided like puffy pants. This is crazy rare. And just so you can see the fabric here, it is the most amazing printed cotton. We think it's probably India, but with an Asian motif, the chrysanthemum motif that you see there. Mm. But what's interesting also is that there's then an overprint, kind of an offset of copper, which outlines, echoes the chrysanthemum pattern. Now, there is the possibility that this was a Liberty of London fabric that was exported from India to Britain and then sold into the United States. Mm-hmm. I've checked with the Liberty of London archive. Unfortunately, most of the archive from 1900 back is missing.
Yeah.
So they definitely said, yes, there's the possibility. This matches exactly the kinds of materials that Liberty of London was handling at the time. So it would be incredible if this truly were a Liberty of London. We don't know much about the ensemble, unfortunately. Stephen did acquire it from a dealer, and the dealer did not want to reveal her source. We know that it came from a family in New England. So unfortunately, that's all we know. Now, so this is the front of it, and you can see how massive those sleeves are. I have a picture of the back as well, and they show how even more gigantic.
And you know, I want to mention that the photo does not get across the largeness of these sleeves. Plus, the woman who originally wore them, she had a larger body. She had such a presence, and it makes it even more of a remarkable statement piece. It's just astounding. Absolutely.
So look for this in our upcoming sporting fashion exhibition. Just so you know, so here she is. We actually have one other, so I thought I would give a sneak peek. So we have the bloomer, mm-hmm. right, which is pretty rare, but then we also have a cycling ensemble with the cycling skirt. And this skirt is equally as rare because it's one of only two knee-length, unaltered 1890 skirts I've ever seen. You know, most of them, they go to the floor, maybe to the ankle. So here actually is our ensemble from the catalog that shows the ensemble itself with its knee-length skirt, but then these are also the cycling undergarments. So stay tuned for a whole lot more fun with sporting fashion.
Yeah, that book is going to be coming out in mid-August, and I think it's available for pre-order now on Amazon, so that's my commercial.
It is. Thank you. Thank you for the commercial, Christina. So, okay, well, we can now turn to what we were going to talk about today, which is, we get so many questions all the time, and we've had a lot of questions come in from viewers. Thank you very much. And I am going to be watching our questions as we go along. So if anybody has anything for us that we don't cover, we'll try to answer it today, but also we can put it into another segment down the road.
Yes.
But it's how do we actually care for our collections? You know, once something enters our doors, what happens to it behind the scenes? Everybody, you know, who can come and visit our galleries is fantastic because you can see everything beautifully presented. And we're telling a story and everything is put into context. But you know, we have more than 15,000 pieces of historic dress that span 400 years of dress history, and they all live together, very huddled, very close. There is no social distancing in our museum storage.
No.
So one of the questions is, when maintaining garments, do you mend or alter them at all, or just store them properly as is?
Right.
Great question.
Yes, I do not sew. You can attest to this. I have no skills whatsoever.
She doesn't.
So what we do is we have our conservator do it, of course. Only trained professionals would ever mend or repair a garment. We do not alter garments, and oftentimes we take later alterations out of garments because we prefer the garment as originally made for its original first wear. So no, we don't mend or alter garments. They come in as is, and if they need repair, we go to the professionals for that.
Right, exactly. You know, and there are ways, it's called preventative conservation.
That's right.
That's what we engage in.
Well, that's what collections management is. Collections management is preventative conservation. So you preserve those collections and you don't have to pay the big bucks to conservators down the road, down the line, right?
Right, exactly. And it's a way of protecting the
Of
pieces.
course.
And it's the environment that you put it in. Yes, we have, the temperature, the humidity control. I'm going to talk about that in just a little while. And we have an inert space, meaning any surface that the objects come in contact with is a stable kind of pH neutral surface. So because like brown cardboard boxes, those are not good to store your garments in. We can't do that because it can burn the object. Sometimes you can see kind of these brown streaks that might develop if an object is touching the side of a brown cardboard box over a period of time. And so we don't want that to happen because it really degrades the fabric very quickly. So I actually brought one of our boxes. This is a small one here. This is a typical archival box. We get them from archival suppliers. Christina, do you know the ones that we buy from?
Yeah, recently we've gone with Gaylord Archival as well as Talus Archival. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a blue board box, and it's not that it's acid free, it's that it is pH neutral. You can also purchase boxes that are alkaline. They have a buffer of material on them, and it depends on the types of materials you're storing. Generally, you do not want to use a buffered product with cottons or linens.
Right. And so this is a small one, so this might be something that, space is a commodity for us, and it's a very valuable commodity. And so we try to compact everything as carefully as possible to store it in the smallest space as possible, but we also have to be aware that, these objects, a lot of them can be very fragile, and they definitely need some space around to support various elements. Down the road, just this morning, we were discussing having a collection conversation, but based on conservation.
Yes.
So to interview our conservator, Kara Varnell, I think would be really interesting because it is such a very specific profession. A lot of science is involved.
She's had an amazing career. She's worked at LACMA, at the Met, and now she's in a private practice.
Yep. So here is the standard cardboard box that we use. Blue board, even though it's kind of more gray.
Yeah.
But as Christina said, it's not acid free.
No.
You can't really do that very well because you think of anything that touches this, if it has acid, can migrate into this box. Mm-hmm. So Christina, what's the lifespan of something like this?
Well, I have to tell you, some of the boxes I replaced when I was collections manager, when I started in 2003, are getting pretty yellowed, they're changing. So it's been a number of years, and it's time to change those boxes out. Generally, you want to change out archival boxes about every 10 years. However, if you change the tissue more often, then those boxes have a longer lifespan. Right.
And these are expensive. This is an investment. And so you have to really prioritize how if you want to collect or you want to care for your historic objects, just like Christina, you've done a number of unboxings about things that people have in their own homes, such as your historic personal photography collection from your family. I mean, I know that you store those in archival boxes because it's just going to protect them.
I do, yeah. And I think it's important to note that if you have a collection, if you're purchasing objects, you need to invest just as much money in that collections management, in that preventative conservation. That's just what we need to do to move these collections forward to the next generation.
Politico Costume just asked how to become a conservator. Mm-hmm. It's a great question because it's very specific. There's very specific kinds of education for that. And so, we are going to do a conservation talk, and we will cover that in a future episode.
Yes, we will.
I do want to move on because we only have so much time today, and it seems to go by very fast. Now, one of the questions also that we had is, has FITM Museum ever had a webbing clothes moth infestation? If so, how do you control it currently?
This is my worst nightmare.
It is. Every institution's worst nightmare.
Right. So we do trap for two different types of moths, the webbing clothes moth and the case making clothes moth. and we just monitor these traps. No, we have never had an infestation, thank goodness. And that's because we clean quite a bit. We monitor who comes in. We have a vacuuming and freezing protocol. Essentially, anything that comes into our office, whether that is a donation or a purchase, is first examined. We look to see if there's any moths, anything hiding in there that could damage that piece or the rest of our collection. And if it can be, the object is frozen. We literally have a deep freezer in our gallery, behind the gallery area, and there's a whole protocol of freezing it for a couple of weeks, taking it out, letting it rest, freezing it again. Afterwards, it is then vacuumed. So anything that was living on the piece is so dead, it's not even funny. And only then,
Murderer.
What?
Murderer.
And only then, well, in the name of fashion, only then can the piece be taken up into our storage facility. And Kevin, I think, did you bring the traps home? Did you bring an example of a trap? Yeah, so this is an example of a trap. It has a small pheromone lure in it, and that lures and thank goodness there's no moths in that guy.
No, look, empty. Nobody's home.
That's what I want to see. It lures the moths there so we can see if there are moths. Now, we have had a couple of moths in our office space, and that's to be expected because we get many donations and acquisitions in. But once it goes through, the donations go through the intensive freezing and vacuuming protocol, we're safe. And by the way, anytime a piece is exhibited, either in our own gallery or as a loan, it has that same mitigation protocol where it's frozen and it is vacuumed.
Yeah, and it's not hoovered. We don't put it on the floor and we don't do that.
Attachment that goes onto a vacuum that has some special filtration on it. We also will oftentimes use a piece of netting just to make sure we're not vacuuming any of the original fibers from the piece, and very carefully it's gone over. It's very meditative actually to vacuum the pieces after they come off of display or when they first come in. Yeah,
you can get in the zone, put in earbuds,
That's
listen
right.
to acid rock as you're vacuuming the 18th century dress.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So within this, I don't know if you can see, there is, and I'm not going to put my finger in there because I'll get stuck. There is a sticky substance all on the inside.
Yes, that's right.
And the little vial right there
is lure. And so
it's for sex. It is telling the moths that are flying around like, hey, go in here and you get to have some sex.
Yeah.
Because the pheromone.
Yes, basically that's what it does, and then they get stuck.
We're luring them for sex, and then we kill them because they get stuck in the little goopy stuff on the inside here. It kind of freezes them, and then it's kind of a sad way to go.
I know. We have a whole Excel chart about the location of each trap in our different office spaces, as well as in our museum storage, with the date that it is checked. And I like to see a real blank Excel. I like to see the check has been done, but no moths have been caught. So there you go.
How often do you need to change these out?
I think it's every couple of months. Yeah, I have to look at my notes on that because our collections manager takes care of that now and has for quite a while. But it's every few months that we do that. But we do check it very frequently.
Yeah, and the thing is you don't have to replace the whole thing. No, you put the pheromone traps and you just throw the next pheromone trap in there.
Throw a new pheromone, yes.
And it keeps it going. Now, if you're noticing that there's dust or something, you need to change these out maybe once every 6 months to a year, depending on where they're located in storage. If it's in a storage area that doesn't have a lot of access, then obviously it's going to last longer. If you have this near a lot of traffic area that might stir up some more dust than usual, that can get caught in here. You then do need to change those out.
That's right. That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So okay.
What's next? What's the next question?
Okay. The next question is. Do you ever clean garments in your collection? If so, how and how often? Mm-hmm. That is it's a great question because yes, we do clean garments, but again, it is very controlled. Now, some objects that we have that come in, a coat from the 1990s, a wool coat from the 1990s is very sturdy, it's very hardy, doesn't have a lot of delicate materials on it or whatever. Seriously, if it's something that we're interested in, we have sent them off to professional dry cleaners.
That's right. Our trusted dry cleaners. If they're hardy and they can withstand a dry cleaning process, and many clothes from the 60s forward can, they're taken to the dry cleaner before they're accessioned.
Right. And again, that helps to not only clean out any stains that could adversely affect the fibers. You know, stains, a lot of stains can be very acidic, and they literally eat the fibers over time. We don't want that to happen. Obviously, if there's stains that are visually distracting, you want to, you know, do away with those. But also, again, if it's wool or something, it's going to help with that process of pest mitigation.
That's right. Proteinaceous stains will attract insects. So we want to get those stains out of there.
Right, and as Christina mentions, it's like if you leave those in and you do, let's say you freeze it, you vacuum it, you put it into storage, but those stains, that food is still on that or in that garment, you know, a bug is going to be attracted to that, and you don't want that to happen. So not only is it good for the fibers because of acids, visually, you know, it takes away from that distraction, but also long term, it helps because it keeps a pest from being attracted to come into your collections. Now, there are other ways that we clean garments that are, this is where the conservator comes in, because it's much more scientific. There's lots of
and it depends on the stain. You might do a full wet treatment. That basically means you submerge the entire garment or object in a wet treatment. You can also spot treat, maybe with a chemical, maybe with a surfactant, but it really has to be done by a professional. It has to. It has to be.
With a lot of consultation, and you know, we are asking for a treatment to be done by a conservator for a specific reason. That maybe the conservator would say, you know, we need to think about this because how much risk do you want? Because anything you do to an object, you're subjecting it to risk. You know, for conservators, I've heard this said more than once, they would just love everything laid in a box with acid-free paper, never touched. All the lights are turned off. Nobody ever sees it because then it's going to last much longer.
And I have to say, with every treatment that we ask our conservator to do, there is a long conversation, a lengthy conversation about what do we want out of it. Do we want this for a photograph? Do we want this for a display? How is it going to affect the rest of the piece? Because if you have a really dark stain on a piece that has all over soiling and you remove that dark stain, you're going to have a light spot. The rest of the garment is going to look darker. So it's complicated. It's complicated.
It is, because there are delicate materials that, you know, a conservator will say, you know what, you're going to have to live with this.
That's right.
There is nothing that can be done, because if you try anything, you are going to majorly damage, perhaps destroy the piece. You know, and something like a wet treatment, it is not just sticking something in water or, you know, throwing some detergent in there. You know, all sorts of different things happen. There are all sorts of different solutions and tests that take place first before anything is wet cleaned. There are all sorts of different solutions that have to be tested first on the piece, because you have to keep that pH neutral aspect within the bath itself. I mean, it's really complicated. It kind of is beyond Christina and my expertise.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating to be around it and to hear trained conservators talk about it, because of what they have the experience to know what is most likely going to happen. And the kinds of things that are completely wet cleaned are, let's say, a linen garment or
a very
wool
heavy
garment,
cotton, cotton.
Right. But it's not something that has lots of frilly little light decoration all over it,
and you know,
because they would be destroyed.
As curators, it's up to us to say what our vision is, what we would like this garment to look like. And then it's also up to us to trust our conservator to say what can and cannot happen for this garment.
Yeah, exactly. And you and I have many discussions, because when we're looking at an acquisition, whether it's a donation from, you know, a generous person, or if it's something that we're thinking about purchasing, you know, these kind of conversations are really important, because is it worth taking this thing into the collection, knowing that we need to invest in preventative conservation, but also perhaps treat this thing down the road with much more costly and time-consuming conservation.
That's right.
You know, because our philosophy at the FITA Museum is that if we really want something, we weigh the rarity of the piece. If we don't accept or buy this object, will we ever have another opportunity? And it's something that we know needs a lot of work, okay? Will we have another opportunity? Should we wait until something else that comes along that then doesn't need all of that treatment? Sometimes it's difficult to say, no, we're not going to acquire it. You know, in hopes that something else will come about. But we have also acquired objects knowing specifically that we would love to use them down the road, but that these children need a lot of help. There are elements that need to be addressed before they could ever be mounted on a mannequin correctly and safely.
So did you bring the example of cleaning that we had talked
about?
about?
I did, yes. Okay, so here is an example of an object that we acquired. So this is 1952 Hermes. This is such a phenomenal dress. There is an entire Life magazine photo series all about the designs that Hermes came out in 1952.
And the photos were taken by Gordon Parks. A wonderful, wonderful series.
And Christina, can you put your hands in these pockets?
I'm trying, I can't.
Why can't you put your hands in the pockets?
Because it's all trompe-l'oeil. These are not actually pockets or buttons. It's
or even collar.
Printed to resemble that, or collar. It's all printed to resemble that. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful day dress from 52 that we acquired.
So a good friend of ours, another dealer, put a photo on his Instagram, and Kristina saw it, I saw it, I swear, like exactly the same.
We need it, we have to have it.
And we pounced on it because this is a really well-known design. And the thing is, it had been found in a theater company's historic collection. You know, like somebody donated, they have no idea where it came from. Somebody gave it to this theater company to use in whatever production down the road. It just ended up in the storage. Nobody ever used it. But the thing is, they had a leak. And that's actually how they discovered it. So I don't know if you can see, but there is really bad staining all along the hem. There was dribbles going down the front.
Yeah, it looks good in that photo, but it was quite severe. In person, it was quite brown. It was a
yellowy brown.
Yellow, yeah.
And the shoulders, where it looks to us like it had been hanging in a clothes, maybe like a cedar clothes closet, right?
It was burnt.
And the edge of the sleeve and the part of the side of the skirt had been touching that cedar closet, and it burned. So it was literally kind of brown. So we had to really contemplate, are we going to take this? Is there a possibility that these stains could come out enough? And now the thing is, for museums, we don't need everything to be perfect as if it's in a department store for somebody to go and buy and wear today. Because in the gallery, when we display things, museum lighting tends to be much lower. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it's much lower, and it helps to mask some of this damage that would be readily available if you took it outdoors into the sunlight.
Yes, it does. It diffuses everything. And so we started having conversations with our conservator and asking, what are the possibilities with this? What do you suggest we do? We would like, it's because the deal is that stain, it's quite detracting. People are going to go to the stain first, and they're not going to be able to appreciate the rest of the design. And so we started talking with her about it, and she started, we said, yes, we're going to do it. Let's go for it. Let's see what happens. And she started coming up with different formulas, started testing them on very, very small elements of the piece. And
generally like underneath the hem.
Yes.
So not in the center of the skirt.
Right. You don't start right in the middle where everyone would see it. You lift the hem and you go to a discrete area in case there's a problem, in case something gets damaged. And she was able to work some magic and made a huge difference in this piece. Do you have the other photo?
I do.
Good.
One of the things that Kara was particularly concerned about were the shoulders where the burning had happened. Because it's not that you can't do away with that browning staining, but the problem is it's so acidic that it weakens the fibers. And she was very afraid that if she put this in a wet bath,
They would just,
that literally those fibers would just give away. And if that happens, there's nothing you can do about it. Now, there's all sorts of treatments that can take place. Conservators can put certain kind of special nettings and supports, temporary supports on those areas that when it's in a wet bath, they kind of sandwich them together. So the waters and so forth can flow through, but it's holding it more stable than if there was no support there.
yes.
So again, we're going to go into this in a little more detail with a conservation
It'll be great to talk
collection conversation. But the thing that was fantastic is that the treatments were successful 95%.
It makes such a difference.
Yeah. So would you all like to see what it looks like for the cat? Because this is in sporting fashion.
Yes, it is.
Well.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So we're replicating. I did not print out. I'm sorry. The period photograph of this model that we will be showing in the catalog. So there's a reason to buy the catalog, but you also get to see this other 1952 photo. But here she is in all of her glory. After she has been cleaned and now styled according to this period photographs that we have of the look. And it was really, really successful. There is still a little hint of the browning at the shoulders, but under, again, gallery lighting that is lower. You will not recognize that. The tide line staining that happened at the skirt, according to our conservator, tide lines are some of the most difficult to get out, because if something is a tide line, it can keep tide lining up your skirt and get bigger. There is a browner stain that is just under the fold here, which actually has not come out completely. But again, we can then style that in the gallery so that light stain is just kind of in a shadow fold. So again,
exactly. Yes, it makes a difference.
Yeah, it's not just, we never have to think about things being worn outdoors again, because once something enters our collection, it's never put on the human body anymore. It's worn on a mannequin. And we do have styling techniques that help to mitigate that damage. We're not ever trying to lie. We're happy to talk about it just like we are now. But, it's to keep it from being very distracting, so you don't look at the object and instead you look at the damage.
Yeah, it's not like we're trying to negate the object's life. These things have had long lifespans. But when a stain is so strong that that's the first thing you look at, then we owe it to the object to try and remove it.
Right. So the next question we have is, what type of environment is best for preservation? Lighting, humidity, storage containers, etc. We've seen the box, but lighting is major. We all know that light fades. My shirt is being faded on this side right now more than on this side because of the window.
On exhibition, the lighting levels are very low. In storage, you'll notice that in most storage facilities, the lights are actually off. If no one is there, lights are always off. But that's when you go to a museum exhibition, especially with works of art on paper or with fashion and textiles, the lighting levels are low because those pieces are intrinsically so sensitive to light. And light damage can never be undone. Once you have a light damage on something, that's it. You're out of luck.
And it's cumulative, too. It gets worse and worse and worse. If you have something that is faded, and if you stop that light coming into it, the fading will just kind of stop right where it left off. If it keeps getting more damage, it'll just get worse and worse. And the light damage is really strange. Obviously if you have a red shirt or a red dress and it's light damage and it kind of looks pink, right?
Yes.
But light damage can do weird things to weird things to colors differently.
Yes, exactly. I've seen things coming in, things offered on donation where it's, let's say, a plaid silk or a check silk, and it has had light damage. And the light damage has only affected the light portions of the check or the silk, the check or the plaid, because of the different dye. The different dye and thread. So depending on what the object is made of, it may be more affected by light damage than another object.
And another thing to think about too is when the object was actually made. Because let's say we're talking about an 18th century gown with actual full 100% natural dyes. Natural dyes tend to be more stable than the later synthetic dyes that were developed in the middle of the 19th century. So if you're talking about a gown from the 1860s, 1870s, these really vibrant colors and beautiful lime greens and Prussian blues and lemony yellows and so forth, they are very susceptible to light damage because the dyes that were used are so unstable. It's not that the silk or wool or linen would necessarily be affected, but those dyes would be affected. So, so what we use is a light meter. I'm sorry, this is backwards. But this is a standard light meter. This is the light meter here. And what you do is, this is the meter, the light, what reads the light levels. So there's a cap on it. You take the cap off, and it exposes the equipment to whatever the ambient light is. And then it will read out right here. So if you take this outdoors and you showed it to the sun, this might be 10,000 lux, which means that it's like 10,000 candles being bundled all together and giving off that light. We talk about foot candles generally, or lux levels in the museum field. Typical, what you want in a gallery is 5-foot candles. So if you have 5 candles and you light them and you put them together and you set them in front of your object, that amount of light is what's considered acceptable for long-term exposure. That also equals 50 lux. So if you're talking about foot candles or lux.
And you need to realize that in an exhibition, you're working with different types of lights. You may have spotlights, you may have floodlights. And so it's not like you just go into a space, you walk in the middle of the space, you get out your light meter, you say, okay, we're good to go, fine. No, you need to actually put it on the garment or the object in multiple spots where that flood is touching, where that spot is touching. And it takes a long time too.
It does, because if you have a spotlight that's coming in from this angle and you put your light meter there, it may be way too bright, whereas this side fits within. So then you're going to have uneven fading going across your object on display. That's why it's really important that you monitor these light levels as carefully as you can. Lots of institutions, particularly for very sensitive objects, light-sensitive objects, you have a sensor. So if somebody comes into the room or somebody approaches the object, the sensor is triggered and then the lights will come on. After a minute, let's say, and there's no movement, the lights will then go off. And it's another way of preventative conservation to help with the problem for light and light-sensitive objects. And just so you get an idea, the same amount of damage happens. Let's say I have an object in our gallery and I have 1-foot candle, one candle, and I leave that candle next to that object nonstop for an entire year. The same amount of light damage will happen as if I, for 5 minutes, flooded that object with really bright light. So again, light damage is cumulative. It doesn't matter if it's real low light or real bright light. It's that time element that causes the damage.
And that's why most storage facilities do not have windows, or if they do, there's very dark coverings on them. Our office does not have windows, because we don't want that natural light coming in and affecting the pieces.
And even when we're in our office, we can control the light levels a little bit. So if somebody is not in a portion of the office or even in storage, if we're working in the front of storage, the lights in the back part of storage are off. It's not like we just turn on all the lights. It's the same thing in our office, that we bring the lights down if we're not working in a certain area of the office, or we turn them up if we need, obviously more light to see. And there's also questions about the light scale as well. You've got the infrared, you've got the visual light, and then you've got the ultraviolet light. We tend to just think about light that we can see. The problem is these lights that you can't see, the ultraviolet light is actually the most damaging.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because light levels are these waves. So ultraviolet waves are very close to each other. They go up and down very quickly. As it gets to the visual light, those light waves spread out. So they're still undulating, but they're wider. And then in the infrared, they're very wide. They're really extended out. So it's the amount of this pulsating aspect of the light spectrum that causes a lot of damage. And literally, you think you have an object, it's laid out, silk object, it's laid out, and all this light hits it, right? And when you laid that object, it was perfect condition. It was very stable. And let's say 10 years later, you go to move that object, and it literally just shreds apart. Nothing's touched it. No bugs have gotten into it. There's been no chemical changes to the dyes or anything. It is solely because of that light damage.
And that's why in works of art on paper and fashion and textiles, you do not really see permanent displays. That's why these exhibitions tend to be, about 3 months. Depends on the hardiness of each garment, but that's why they're shorter in duration.
So our next question is, how is clothing stored so that folds do not damage the clothing?
Right. Well, a number of steps. First of all, anything can be hung up in storage unless it can't, right? So if something is knit, if something is heavily beaded or bias cut, if something is fragile at the shoulders or heavy, those are the types of things that are boxed. Depending on how much space you will have 1 object in a box, 5 objects in a box, depending on how large the object is. But what we do essentially, and I have my show and tell now too, is we use tissue paper. This is not the tissue paper that you get when you wrap gifts. This is a pH neutral tissue paper from Gaylord or Talus. And so what we do is, generally our boxes for garments, for example, are 18 inches long by either 30 or 60 inches, 18 inches wide by 60 or 30 inches long. So it's up to us to make the garment fit in that box. We may fold the sleeves over, we may lay the bodice on a skirt, and with each fold, whether that's a sleeve folded over, maybe a skirt folded, we have fun with tissue paper. So what we do are we make sausages. I'm taking this tissue paper. I know you can't see the whole thing, but this is the patent Fit a Museum method, and you scrunch it. Do you see? Do you see how I'm scrunching it up, right? And this creates a little kind of pillow, little sausage pillow. And then at the very end, because I don't like these folds, at the very end, we go like this with the smooth tissue. I'm literally rolling it over the kind of crinkle accordion sausage I made. And this is what goes in the neckline or the sleeves, etc. We also lay tissue over folds. Also,
by doing the crinkling and then rolling that last end creates a smooth surface.
Okay, so I'm halfway there, and then, oh, it's so nice and smooth.
Because there are little bits and pieces all over garments that you don't want to get caught, because you could pull it off.
And if there's something that's especially fragile, I will take this lens tissue. Do you see how it's very lightweight? You could kind of see through it. And what I will do is I will take my sausage, and I'll take my lens tissue, and I will just gently place the lens tissue over it and do that same kind of roll technique. And it makes a soft, just a soft layer for some of those very fragile silks. And it's just very nice to use. So we use both of those types of tissue in the collection. And then with hanging. Oh, do you want to keep talking about boxing?
Just, this is the way we do it.
Oh, this
because
is the way we do it.
It's quick.
It's
the tissue is it can be expensive and it comes in big sheets. We prefer sheets of tissue versus on the rolls that you have to cut. We don't like that at all.
Annoying, yeah.
It's very annoying. But there are other institutions that make kind of their own like silk tube little sausages. That they put in and they do real long, or maybe able to make short ones depending on what they need them for. So there's all sorts of ways that and you can come up with your own techniques too. Somebody just asked, what is that second Yeah, Christina, what's that called again?
Different companies call it by different names. We call it lens tissue. I believe it's called abaca tissue in some companies as well. And if you have specific questions about collections care, you can feel free to direct message us or email us info@fitamuseum.org, and we're happy to give you more particulars about how to care for collections, definitely.
Right. So we've got our box, we've laid some tissue in the bottom, we've laid our object on, we've made our little tubes. You put it maybe into the arm side right here, and you fold your sleeve over. So, or if something is very long, we have to fold it like a textile or something if it's not being rolled. Because you can also use tubes and so forth to roll textiles that you would cover in the same kind of tissue that you just showed.
Yes, so, sorts of storage solutions for accessories. We're talking about like garments and textiles right now, but you can tie down accessories like a shoe. You may have a mount where it's tied down on that, and there's not tissue around it per se, or a hat mount. And we can certainly go into more specialty mounts in our unboxings or on Instagram Live. Yeah.
Yeah, this can be as simple as using tissue, and it can get at these storage techniques can be incredibly complex.
Yes.
You have custom built forms that then custom built boxes, because which we have done, because it's not only for storage within our areas within the museum for storage, but sometimes we engineer these things that they can also travel. So they sit in storage until they need to go somewhere, and then they also work for traveling, which is a whole other kind of animal when it comes to moving objects carefully to other institutions. So it can get really, really complex. And so we're just talking about the basics today.
Basics. And many of our garments, they are sturdy enough and strong enough to hang. And so I brought a couple hangers to show you. This is not the hanger you want to use. This is from my closet. This is a pink plastic hanger, and the issue with this is that it's going to outgas. There's not any support. Look at how skinny that is. It's going to create a line on the shoulder area, or if you put your skirt there, it's going to create a line there. So that's trashola. I don't want that. This is what we use in the museum office. Okay, this is a hanger with a muslin cover on it, and I'll deconstruct it so you can see. It's actually a wooden hanger. It does not have a shellac on it. And what we do, this one is a little bit long, but for some of the 19th century women's wear pieces or children's pieces, they have a very narrow shoulder line. And so we just have our maintenance staff we ask them to cut the sides of the hanger off so that it can be a smaller size. So we have this muslin cover, which we have volunteers make, and we can take these off and we can wash them in case there's dust. And then there is a layer of 100% polyester needle punch batting that covers the wood. So no wood is touching the garment. It's not outgassing. Actually, I made tons of these when I first came on board FITM and was collections manager. And you can make them as thick as you need, or as thick as storage will allow. Some of the pieces we have much thicker hanger than this one. And this is what we use. We also find that in museum storage, it's very helpful to have all of the hangers have the same, be facing the same way, so that the slight curve makes the most use of space. You don't want a hanger this way and then a hanger this way, because it just takes up too much space and it's annoying. And for the skirt and slacks, we do use plastic. We use a plastic hanger. However, we have a very thick piece of archival felt that we place in the hanger. That is not only to mitigate any outgassing of the plastic, but also so that you don't get the indentations on your garment. You can see even on this piece of felt, there are some indentations because this clamp is quite strong. So this is the way we store our separate skirts or pants in a very nice, safe way.
And also what's nice is that the tension is across that skirt waistband, let's say, right? Instead of the little clippy ones, that are right here, because if you clip those, and then in time, you start to, the fabric, the weight of that skirt starts to sag, and you end up
with a
skirt or whatever.
Yeah. This holds the entire waistband really
all the way
sturdy. Yeah. That's okay. That's my show and tell.
Nice.
For now.
Thank you. Thank you. And the thing is, it's all basic. You don't have to be fancy in storage.
No, you don't.
It's fitting in the space that you have to live in and making the most of that room and being as organized as possible. That's another really important thing about collections care, is being organized. Yeah, because, you know, when you end up with thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces, you need to know where they are. And Christina, can you really quickly just describe how we have our collection organized?
Yeah, we have 3 main storage rooms. Our largest storage room is for women's garments. And we have pieces arranged either by designer or brand or non-designer. So many of the 18th and 19th century pieces, those are in our non-designer section. And within each decade of the non-designer section, it is by object ID. So it's very easy to find. And this is all tracked by row and bank in our Past Perfect system. In the designer or brand section, that is arranged alphabetically. And within each alphabetized section, it is also by object ID. We have like accessories together, such as all of the footwear, all of the headwear, all of those objects are with each other. So it's very basic. And it's really important to put locations in some kind of database so that it's not just, you know, in one person's head, so everyone can access it. And I will say that I think the collections manager position, that is the position that deals with these types of things every day. And when I first would tell people I was a collections manager when I started at FITM, people would say, "Oh, do you call people and like harass them for bills?" Like, what are you talking about? Because I guess that's what a collections is, right? In many businesses. But the collections manager in a museum, no matter the department, is so, so vital, because you need to be able to sensitively deal with objects in terms of handling. You need to be hyper organized. You need to have the objects you need to protect these objects. And it's those day-to-day activities of tracking those insects, making sure that lighting is correct, making sure that humidity is correct, that will guarantee the collection can be passed on to the next generation of researchers and enthusiasts. Those day-to-day activities.
Maria E. Kind Millinery just asked, what do you do to mitigate humidity? We're fortunate that living out here on the West Coast, we have tend to have a stable environment. We don't have the great fluctuations from freezing, you know, storm snows and stuff, all the way to in the winter to the summertime, having it be, you know, hot and very, very humid. We're fortunate that we are in a much more stable environment. However, that, you know, it's those great fluctuations suddenly that can cause a lot of the damage to objects, because, you know, these fibers, they expand and contract according to their environment. And if it happens too fast, that can crack silk and cause all sorts of problems.
Yes.
So you want to keep a stable environment. There is no exact 100%.
It's about,
generally,
we like about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, plus or minus a few degrees. We like about 50% humidity, plus or minus a few percentage points. And we generally have more troubles with dryness. You know, our storage is all interior. There's no exterior walls, which is great, because that it tends to create more problems. Like a lot of historic house museums have challenges with that. But we work diligently with our building engineer. There's an alarm system, and it's done just with the mechanics of the building.
Right, and you know, and we have an air conditioning systems within each of our areas, and they are air conditioning systems.
You live in New Orleans, so that's a challenge.
It's not the whole building.
Yeah, she says they live in New Orleans, so that is definitely a more challenging environment for humans.
Right, right, exactly, and you know, you need to consult with a professional building environmental person within the area that you live and your collections are stored. That's a really important thing, because again, this is also preventative conservation.
Depending on the size of the space, one can invest in dehumidifiers.
Yes.
You know, I used my bedroom in high school was in the basement of my parents' house, and it would get very, very humid there. And we purchased some rolling dehumidifiers, and every day I would turn it on and then I would dump out the water. So there can be more affordable fixes too, depending on how large the space is.
So we're running out of time. So I just want to
5 more minutes.
I know, two more questions, and we got to be quick.
Yep.
How often do you take collections out to breathe? Does that even matter? Christina and I were fortunate that we got to design our museum storage space. And we have compact storage, which means, the banks move. We have kind of one aisle, and you move a bank, and you kind of move that aisle around. And it's to be able to cram as much in our storage as possible without damaging the objects. Now, one of the things that we came up with was, these banks, and you have garments hanging up, you've got box storage and so forth, but we created these covers that are made of ripstop nylon that are magnetized around 3 sides because the banks are made of metal and they're magnetized. So, we can just, hold these on to cover them over. So any kind of dust that might be floating around, or if we have the lights on, it's another way of helping to protect the objects. But there is no magnetized abilities at the bottom. Mm-hmm. So it keeps the objects covered, but allows air to flow through. You do want air to flow in and around your objects, because if you have this kind of weird sealed environment that nothing ever moves, think of the back of your closet that you really don't go into except maybe once a year, to get out your winter clothes, and then all of a sudden you find little moths in there. Yeah. You want a living collection, because if you have a living collection, that means the bugs don't want to be around it, because they know activity is taking place, that there is fresh air around.
And I will say that if you are changing out tissue paper, maybe every 5 years, or if you get into a box to examine something, maybe for exhibition, that is your opportunity to take it out, let it breathe, choose a different type of crease and repad it. And that's a great opportunity to do that.
And last but not least, are you ever torn between storing and putting the clothing on display in order to preserve it for longer duration?
Oh.
Yes. I mean, we did touch on this a little bit, but
everyone to see our museum's collection. Of course, but you do need to think about the next generation having the opportunity to see it as well. And there's some pieces that have been loaned out many, many times. They're very popular pieces, and when it comes back that final time, we say, this needs to rest. We need to hold off on this particular piece. Yeah. It's tough though.
So I'm going to show something that actually is Kristina's favorite.
Oh, but see, I want to tell the whole story. So for our next one, I'm going to tell a really neat story about this piece, because it's one of my favorite pieces in the collection.
This is how we had it on exhibition a few years ago, and for photography, and you can see how beautifully dressed it is. And in storage, this is how she looks. She is
hanging up, sturdy
enough to hang up. And if you notice that it's on the padded hanger, and we choose the wood hangers because they're strong. Some of these plastic hangers and so forth, with weight, we don't want them to snap or break.
They're slippery, so I like the wooden hanger. And there she is, very happy.
This hanger we had cut, because, as Kristina said, she was showing you one of the longer ones. So it's cut because this has narrower shoulders. It's got its cover on there, but it doesn't have heavy beading. It's a sturdy wool fabric, especially at the shoulders. And so this is one of the ones that hangs up in our storage.
Yes, and I am going to be telling the story. Maybe our next one we can fit it in, because the piece
that would
really,
be great.
Yeah. Okay, gosh, 2
minutes. I know, Kristina, I want to thank you for, joining me again today for the Fit Museum Collection Conversations. Yeah. Everybody, please send in questions. It's some questions that came in that gave us the idea for doing this talk today. Again, I think because we're having a number of questions come in about conservation aspects, which go beyond Kristina and Kevin. So we could have our conservator, Kara Varnell, come and talk all about those kind of scientific aspects. And so we just want to thank you all for joining us today. And
yeah, we love connecting with all of you through social media.
We do. And so again, look forward to Sporting Fashion, Outdoor Girls, 1800 to 1960, coming out mid-August. It can be pre-ordered right now through Amazon. And then eventually we will have it available in our museum and our museum shop when we can all open again and visit each other. The exhibition will be making a nationwide tour over a 3-year period, starting next March, and we will have more details about that forthcoming. So all of you around the world, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for joining us once again. Bye-bye.
Bye.